The sun and moon appear identical in size. So the sun is supposedly 93 million miles away, exactly 400 times larger than the moon and 400 times further away. The fact that the sun and moon are identical in size when standing on planet Earth is one big, huge, astronomically unlikely coincidence that is asserted in the globe model as a relatively mundane factoid. So this one single coincidence isn't enough to say that the globe model is wrong, but it's enough to raise an eyebrow if you're a forensic investigator, as I am.
Now what I'm going to show you now, we have talked about, and many sharp-eyed viewers have known that this was an important thing about this clip for a long time. Here comes the wave. Look at the dark underlined crater in the center of your screen. Watch how it's displaced, almost like you're looking through water. There goes the wave backwards, forwards, the wave hits the crater, displaces. This wave is displacing, as if you were looking through water, the entire image of the moon. Now, I've never taken the time to animate this. I have talked about it. There it is zoomed in. Now, this is running at 30%, and I'm going to zoom out. There goes the wave to the top, and there's going to be another wave coming in from the bottom. Now, I'm going to run this at 30%, so as the wave comes in, you can choose any landmark you want. Here comes the wave from the bottom to the top. Choose any little landmark you can see there, and watch it be displaced. Now, that round-looking ring crater, forwards, backwards, and one more time forward, and I'll zoom out, and you can watch it go all the way to the top. Again, this is at 30% with quite a few filters like find edge and some other things, invert. Now that means a lot. That means the entire image of the moon was displaced by this wave.
Pitchers, steroids, Santa Claus, kicks and deals. It's a long fly ball going back, and the ball shatters the sky, bringing the ocean itself down into the stadium. Oh, Simpson just broke this dream's reality wide open.
The issue is that 90% of Earth's population or more are still in a deep slumber, and refuse to do any thinking for themselves. They'd rather kneel down to whatever self-proclaimed authority is in place and blindly follow them into intentional misunderstanding and ignorance. Everything you think you know about the universe is a lie. Fantastic theories passed off as factual information. Gravity is nothing more than a scapegoat to explain why you're able to travel hundreds of thousands of miles per hour on a spinning ball without falling off.
The solar system is made up of one star, a handful of planets, more than 100 moons, millions of rocky asteroids, and billions of comets. All these bodies revolve around the sun because of the gravity of the sun. Gravity of the sun is a force that pulls the objects toward the center of the sun. The sun is the only star in our solar system. It is a huge ball of fire shooting light and heat in all directions. No living thing can survive without the sun. All the planets and the moons use sun rays for their light.
I told Killian I'd be back. I wouldn't want to be a liar.
There are 8 planets in our solar system. They are Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Earth is the planet where we live. It is the 3rd planet from the Sun, after Mercury and Venus. Earth is the 5th biggest planet of the solar system, but all the planets are tiny in comparison to the Sun. It takes 365 days to revolve around the Sun. Earth looks blue from space because it is mainly covered by water. There are many planets that have more than one moon. The moon revolves around the Earth as well as the Sun. It takes 24 hours to revolve around the Earth. The moonlight we see from Earth is the light from the Sun. There are some small rocky bodies in the solar system that have been left over from the formation of the planets. These are called asteroids. Asteroids don't have enough gravity to pull them into the shape of a ball. Most of them lie in between Mars and Jupiter. Comets are balls of rock and ice that grow tails as they approach the sun. Comets come from far away, an imaginary place at the edge of the solar system. As it moves closer to the sun, the glowing tails are visible.
what the flat Earth thing brings up questions certain fundamental things in your reality. For example, this is the one that broke it down for me, and I bet you it's going to break it down for you. Observations that can't be made on a 25,000-mile ball circumference Earth. Certain observations can't be made. Where I live on Kauai, on a clear day I can see Oahu. Oahu is 70 miles away. That's 1 degree of the Earth's curvature. The Earth's curvature drops away from you at 8 inches times the distance in miles squared. So, for example, at 9 miles, that's 54 feet. But as soon as you get to 30 miles, that's 600 feet. By the time it's 70 miles, it's 1,187 meters. Meters. So that means the bulge should come up in front of you, and I should see from Kauai only the tops of the mountains of Oahu. You don't see that. You see it all the way down to the coast. You see the whole island. Not possible on the model that we've been sold. That's the one that broke it down for me. Optically, it's one of the things you have to deal with. Optically, the world's flat. Whatever other than optic, you have to figure that out. But the water also corresponds to optical flatness, too. The water sits flat. Your eyesight sits flat. You see it optically flat. You can get any bit of optical equipment, like this guy had a great camera up here. That camera can prove to you conclusively that when a ship goes over the horizon, it never went over a curve, because all you have to do is dial it in, it's still there. It doesn't go over a horizon. So the horizon is just going outside of your eye distance. So part of this whole thing about how we ended up with the whole ball Earth theory is that we're super arrogant about our eyesight. The idea of being able to see a star that's 482 quadrillion miles away is so completely ridiculous, is so bad. I just had to let that one go. It's like 482 quadrillion miles. No, sorry, your theory is wrong. We're not buying it. We're not believing it. All theories to test if the Earth is moving or the heavens are moving indicate the heavens move, Earth doesn't move. Foucault's pendulum that indicates the Earth's moving, it switches direction during an eclipse. Does that mean the Earth switched direction? Just stuff like this, they're just sold to us. You have to dig it apart. As soon as you have an observation, I'm 30 miles away from the international airport in Iceland. I'm across the water. I can see it. It's 30 miles away. It's 50 miles driving. So on my phone, I can see it's 30 miles away. I can see the airport. There it is. Should be behind 600 feet of curvature. It's behind 0 feet of curvature. You can't explain this stuff with a 25,000-mile ball Earth. Now, then what happens is as you dig into this, you start to go, well, what about NASA? What about these pictures we've seen? Now, as Americans, I've been doing this, and we did this in Costa Rica. We spent $3.3 trillion on NASA. That's what we're spending on this garbage. What do we get? We get 12 pictures of the Earth from space. When you dig into those pictures, they're not real pictures. They don't have the altitude to get the shot, so they're composites, where they've been positioned together under framework that magnifies it. So they got a little picture going snap, 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 and they put that together into a bigger picture. It's called a composite. That's what all those images are. Look into it by their own admission. You can't get the altitude to take the shot. It's been 60 years. We should have the altitude to take the shot. Or turn that Hubble telescope around and face it towards the Earth, and let's watch the Earth spin in real time. And watch I want to know about the weather on the ball Earth that we're supposedly spinning around in a ball. I want to see the weather patterns from a supposed satellite that's up there, instead of composite images that are taken from close up that are pieced together to make it look like it's from far away. They're constructed. Then you start to dig into, well, who's behind all this stuff? What is this? Why do we get this garbage? And that's when you really hit the rabbit hole. That's when you really dig in. But the thing that's so important is your own observations have to corroborate all of it. If your observation doesn't correlate to their system, guess what's wrong? You or them. They sold you, they put this thing in front of you in school the first day. You're 5 years old, you're in kindergarten. What do they put in front of you? They put in a globe and a Mercator projection of the Earth with Greenland's like bigger than Africa. Remember that map? Are these accurate? Is any map accurate? Is Google Earth accurate? Every cartographer will tell you that no map is accurate. Everything is out of whack by about 5 to 10%. Easy. So we could take other maps and say this is the Earth or that's the Earth. The way that NASA puts all the satellite imagery into a composite image is a teardrop shape like that.
There's no inside structure.
Is it hollow?
Yeah, there's only a surface. There's nothing inside.
Is the sun actually, do you believe, combusting in on
It's
itself?
not burning anything. There's no fusion in the sun. That's well understood.
Prove it.
Yeah, well, there's not the way to prove that there is any. It's only in the flares that you get fusion. That's why all the X-rays. The flares, the arcs, and the X-rays, and the microwaves, and whatever result of fusion in the arcs. There's no fusion in the sun. They don't know how the sun works.
Why do you, what's special, how does the sun make light?
It's a transformer. Transforms from some other dimension. It's not burning anything. It doesn't have to. It's a converter.
Of what?
I don't know. Nobody knows. But that's what it does. That's the only thing it can do, because that's how everything works.
It's transforming from another dimension.
Yeah, you could say it's taking energy from another dimension, counter space. There is no energy, actually. You can't, most of it you can't even measure in outer space or see.
You can't see.
No, you can't see the sun in free space.
So the sun is not visible in outer space.
Not in free space. It's only invisible when gross matter becomes involved, like the Earth's atmosphere and envelope and the surface of the moon or whatever. That makes the light. Otherwise, there is no light. You can see the moon, you can see the Earth, but you can't see the sun or you can't see the stars.
But you can see the planets and the
Yeah,
satellite.
right. You can see material objects, but you cannot see the sources of light. There is no light until there's a material object.
To reflect off.
So that means there's no time delay. So the whole time delay thing is meaningless. It doesn't take light years. There are no light years because there's no light. So that means that the light you see from the distant stars isn't 4 million years old. It could be only minutes old. It could be instantaneous. All the theories collapse when you can't see the
If
stars.
the Earth doesn't move, then what? Then the heavens move. Here's an observation. You got to make it. You got to get this observation yourself and come to deal with it. Because when you put all this together, you realize that we're in a rational, irrational situation. The sun's motion and the sun's timing system can't be exactly correlated precisely with the moon's. The moon loses 12% on the sun every day. The stars lose 1% against the sun every day. So the sun's tick back 1% each day. 360 is a whole turnaround, but we have 365 days. When you start putting the sun's motion, the moon's motion, and the star's motion together, it's irrational. They don't make sense. So you end up with Mayan calendars is trying to get an accurate of where we're going into the future because these three clocks don't match up with each other. That indicates intelligence. That indicates that we're in a realm, not a planet. We're in a realm of some sort. There's another observation. This one took me a while to understand this. I've been observing it, something you want to take in. As you get higher up in the atmosphere, the Earth at 20,000 feet should begin to pull away from you if we're on a 25,000-mile ball circumference Earth, which means you should start to see the curvature, and you should be able to optically measure it by snapping it to a grid in your camera. I haven't been able to make that observation. That's why the whole thing broke down on me. Here's what's interesting. Our world, we're supposed to be scientific. We're supposed to use the scientific method. That's what we're taught. If you use the scientific method, eventually you run into this. You can't question that. That's not questionable. That's just a fact. No. We want to use the scientific method to evaluate this supposed fact. No. You can't do that because that's a fact. Any field you run into, you'll find these suppositions. They're built into it. So we're going to question the supposition that we're on a curved surface. We'll question it optically with that camera right there. In order to question it optically, we have to put the camera lens. We can't make a mistake and think that the lens of that camera is not going to affect our outcome because it will. The lens of your eye also affects the outcome. So that means the horizon has to be exactly at eye level, and the horizon of your camera and the reticle at the center of the lens needs to snap to flat horizon right there. Then we go out to a peninsula right on the sea. You snap to flat horizon on a reticle in the middle of your camera, and then you swing it to left and right, 30 to 40 miles that way or that way. That should drop off 600 feet on the edges. You should be able to detect some curvature with your camera. We are always surrounded our whole lives and always have been by a straight line that runs around us with no curvature around it. There's no optical curvature. Whatever that means for you, it's an observation you have to make. The observation we're told we should make is 8 inches times the distance in miles squared. That's the fall off of the ball Earth. You determine if that's something you observe. And when you stop observing that, then you got to start questioning what is going on here. Because it's not fitting the model that we're sold that we're on a ball, Mars is a ball, Venus is a ball, the sun's a ball, and we're going around that ball. Southern hemisphere, anybody can prove this. You can take any data out you like, and it's like that on the internet. Same latitude, southern hemisphere is different from the northern hemisphere. Different sun movement. The sun moves faster in the southern hemisphere than in the northern. There's no twilight in the southern hemisphere. There's no twilight in New Zealand. But as the summer progresses in the northern hemisphere, we have a twilight. The sun's still out at 9 or 10 p.m. The further north you are, 11 p.m., that sun is still visible. A little bit in the sky. Twilight. Not so in the southern hemisphere. That can't be rectified on a symmetrical ball. It indicates that the sun moves and we don't. As far as I'm concerned, my study of this, heliocentric model is a nightmare. Complete garbage. Think about that. But then I'll question basic assumptions, which our system won't. It doesn't want that. It wants you to be unable to question anything or any basic assumption, so that we get sold whatever garbage sticks, and that becomes our ball model. I know we got Star Wars, I know we got Star Trek. That doesn't mean it's real. Those are like movies, TV shows. It's not real. What is real? Rational, irrational, both at the same time. The Earth you move on is irrational. I defy anybody to come up with the answer to this riddle. You want to take a map and see if you can map this out? Take your flight and you're going to map this using just flight data, not given distances. So the flight data indicates it's a 4.5-hour flight from Los Angeles to Honolulu. That's an average. You take the 4.5-hour flight to Honolulu from Los Angeles. Honolulu, you fly to Taiwan. That's a, 9.5-hour flight, whatever that is, 10 hours. Just flight time only. You factor out wind direction, dominant wind direction. Then you map your way all the way around the whole world. Then you try to take all that data and put it into a grid and make it make sense. You don't need data that they give you. You can do it all by flight times and given airports and their distance from each other. We did that. What it indicates is an irrational object. It doesn't indicate a ball. It doesn't indicate a flat surface. It indicates it indicates a number of possibilities.
Is flying around the curve of the Earth, then he should be dipping the nose down every 5 minutes. He should be dipping the nose down to stay around the curve. But the thing that really got me interested was, as you say, the gyroscope. In a plane there is an artificial horizon, okay, and it's based on a gyroscope. And if you spin a gyroscope on a surface, it will want to stay upright. You can twist and tilt the surface as much as you like, the gyroscope will stay upright. So if a plane has a gyroscope and it starts following the curve of the Earth, the gyroscope would stay upright, which means the artificial horizon will start to roll backwards. But it doesn't. That's absolute proof that a plane flies over a flat surface rather than a curved one. Because I asked the pilot on my last flight, do you ever notice the artificial horizon rolling backwards? He said, no, but the artificial horizon has complex electronics in it to make sure it knows where it is on the Earth and it compensates. But I went to the manufacturer of the artificial horizon and they confirmed to me that it's completely mechanical. Nothing electronic in it whatsoever. So it's literally just a gyroscope that can freely move. So that right there is proof to me that planes fly over a plane.
Randmere State Park. This is from Joshua Nowicki, and what you're seeing here is a mirage. You typically would not be able to see this from the Lake Michigan shore. We talked about this last night. Conditions are right on the lake. We're actually seeing a mirage of the Chicago skyline. Very interesting. Here's what's happening. This is a good example of a superior mirage. So Joshua was on the Lake Michigan shore. He was looking towards the west, and Chicago's beyond the horizon. Should not be able to see it. However, with the right conditions, we have an inversion. We have cold air near the cold lake water and some relatively warmer air above it. This will bend the image of that skyline back towards the viewer. And so typically we would not be able to see this. This image would be viewable from much, much higher in the sky, up in space. But instead, we're able to see it on the Lake Michigan shore. Very fascinating, and that's the same reason we're actually seeing this ring on the radar tonight as well. Because of the inversion we call atmospheric ducting, it's bending the radar rays back towards the ground. So even on a clear night, we have some interesting weather.
Now, before I proceed with the video, this is a very important point I want to replay that the meteorologist says.
The horizon should not be able to see it. However, with the right conditions, we have an inversion. We have cold air.
Okay, he just stated, because of the horizon, the curvature basically, you shouldn't be able to see the Chicago skyline. Now, taking a look at this photo provided by Joshua Nowicki, you can clearly see that this is no mirage. And I'll get into that in a little bit. I'll explain a superior mirage and how it looks like. And this is no superior mirage. Now understand, the distance from Chicago to Grand Mirror State Park in Stevensville, Michigan, it's 90 miles away. And they say over water it's 60 miles. Now understand one thing. With the supposed curvature of the Earth, and at 60 miles, that will lead you to 2,400 feet behind the supposed horizon or the curvature. So the Sears Tower, also known as Willis Tower, being at 1,700 feet to the tip, the whole tower basically should be behind the horizon or the supposed curvature of the Earth. And also he talks about the superior mirage. With superior mirages, the mirage is inverted. And I'm going to show some examples of that. With these photos, you can clearly see the inverted mirage. Again, more of the same. So again, when you look at this skyline, it's a complete insult for that meteorologist to call this a mirage. Nothing about this is a mirage, completely real. And also, to go along with the photo from Stevensville, Michigan, I found an additional photo from even further, a little bit further, at St. Joseph's. Found on this blog here. You can clearly see, again, the Chicago skyline all the way across Lake Michigan. And there was a dispute as far as the distance was concerned from Chicago to Michigan City, Indiana. And I want to clarify this. I might as well mention how it's been stated how the distance is driving miles. Now, from point A to point B across the lake, they say it's approximately 40 miles. So even if that's the case, with 40 miles, that's still over 1,000 miles, a little over 1,000 miles behind the supposed curvature. So in that case, you should only see the very tips of these few buildings over here. The lower ones shouldn't be in view at all. So clearly, again, doesn't add up with what the meteorologist is saying. And clearly, again, this is no mirage. And take a look at some more photos here from Michigan City, Indiana, and the views of the Chicago skyline. A couple more images. And again, I point this out with the people standing on the beach. You can clearly see these are not inverted buildings. Clearly, they're there. And again, the Chicago skyline. Just for reference. And again, another photo from Michigan City, Indiana. Clearly no mirage. Again, more the same. So to me, with this video, this is probably the best proof, or one of the best proof, supporting the flat earth theory.
The civilian space exploration team is to be the first civilian team in history to launch a rocket that reaches space.
All systems are go for launch. T-minus 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
He's out there taking pictures. Here's another video that he took. Time lapse, looking toward Chicago from the top of a dune in Warren Dunes State Park. Miles away. You're not supposed to be able to see this. Look at that. City of Chicago from 60 miles away. And yet some knucklehead drone is going to read a prompter that's telling him to explain this as a mirage. These are photographs taken by a guy named Joshua Nowicki, right on his website. Here are some more of his pictures. You can check out for yourself, look at them. Chicago. That doesn't look like a mirage to me. The buildings also are not leaning off to the sides or leaning away from you. They're perfectly straight up and down. If this is a mirage, I mean, first of all, it'd be all distorted and wavy and look totally weird. If we really are on a globe, then they should be like facing away from you. Leaning away, not perfect straight up and down. They should be leaning side to side. They shouldn't look like that.
And what you're seeing here
is a mirage. We typically would not be able to see this from the Lake Michigan shore. We talked about this last night. Conditions are right on the lake that we're actually seeing a mirage.
That is not a mirage. Okay? You can know a mirage when you see it on the road and it looks like water. You may see a little something at the end of the horizon at the beach. That, my friends, not a mirage.
Of the Chicago skyline. Very interesting here. Here's what's happening. This is a good example of a superior mirage. So Joshua was on the Lake Michigan shore. He was looking towards the west, and Chicago's beyond the horizon. Should not be able to see it. However, with the right conditions, we have an inversion. We have cold air near the cold lake water and some relatively warmer air above it. This will bend the image of that skyline back towards the viewer. And so typically we would not be able to see this. This image would be viewable from much, much higher in the sky, up in space. But instead, we're able to see it on the Lake Michigan shore.
Survey said. Everything that guy just says is bullshit. Thank you.
And what you're seeing here is a mirage. We typically would not be able to see this from the Lake Michigan shore. We talked about this last night. Conditions are right on the lake that we're actually seeing a mirage of the Chicago skyline. Very interesting here. Here's what's happening. This is a good example of a superior mirage. So Joshua was on the Lake Michigan shore. He was looking towards the west, and Chicago's beyond the horizon. Should not be able to see it. However, with the right conditions, we have an inversion.
Oh, the right conditions. Tell us what those are.
We have cold air near the cold lake water and some relatively warmer air above it. This will bend the image.
Hold it! What the hell is that shit?
But instead, we're able to see it on the Lake Michigan shore.
So let's do the math. Distance from Grand Mare to Chicago was 59 miles. So we do our little equation. 8 times 59 times 59 equals 27,848. Divided by 12 equals 2,320 feet. So that is the amount of curvature, ground to ground, that would be existing in a 59-mile stretch. So is that what we saw in the picture of the mirage? Well, here we get to see what the math shows us it should look like. You'll see I took 4 buildings that we could recognize from those pictures in the Google Earth. Took each of their heights, including the Sears Tower, which stands 1451 or thereabouts. And this is what we should have seen. We should have seen the curvature of the Earth being the blue line, our line of sight being the green line, being at our total height of 2,000 plus. We shouldn't have seen any buildings. But what did we see? We saw this. Quite a bit different, and a difference of about 3,000 feet, and it's not a mirage. It is simply being able to see further than the owners of this world thought that we'd be able to. So they got something wrong. Here's the picture again. Now, I think for some of you, that's the final straw. I think a few people out there probably see the truth now. There really is no way around it. We're seeing further than we mathematically can on a globe. So I understand the breakup may be tough. So grab some box of tissue, go get in bed with the globe, tell a little bedtime story, what it was like 4.55 billion years ago when it was just a swirling pile of dust. And by tomorrow you'll be over it and ready to face the world flat as it is. But we know how it is, that some of you out there are just going to keep fighting this. You just love that globe so much, you're going to make excuses for it. You're like that girl that's got a boyfriend that beats her, yet she blames herself and tells everybody that he loves her and that's why he does it, to protect her. You're going to be the same way with the globe, so you too need to go grab a box of tissue, go get in bed with your globe, and let's leave it at that.
And that turns out to be about 3,100 miles. And if you were going to try and hide this information, that the sun is actually very close, perhaps you'd encode it in symbol. Does this look familiar?
The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat, take no solution. The earth is flat, living in illusion. So
There are quite a few videos like this one where people send up their video cameras on weather balloons. One thing to note is where you can see a hot spot on the clouds directly under the sun, like here. You see it? Directly under the sun is a hot spot. Now, that would be impossible if the sun was 93 million miles away. But also note how the sun appears to move with the Earth. As the camera rocks about, you'll see the sun moving around with the Earth. Now again, if the sun was 93 million miles away, you wouldn't see that. Just like if you were on a speeding train, the trees next to the track will whiz past you, but the mountains in the distance would, well, they'd hardly move. And if the sun was behind those mountains, the sun wouldn't move at all. In the flat Earth model, the sun rotates around us and only appears to rise and set because of the way our vision works. We see in perspective. That is, the horizon is at our eye level. And as things recede from us, they tend to converge to the centre of that horizon line, to a place that's known as the vanishing point. Just as if you were standing at the end of a very long corridor, you would see that the walls would appear to converge. The floor would appear to rise up to meet the horizon, and the ceiling would also appear to move downwards. Of course, the walls and the ceiling are all parallel to each other, so they don't actually move anywhere, but it would just appear that way. And anything that lies beyond the vanishing point is effectively invisible to us. It's beyond the limit of our vision.
Hey, geh weg, Marc. Was ist da hinter der Wolke? Guck mal hier! Ich seh's. Guck mal, siehst du es? Der geht hinter der Sonne. Ey, der eine geht hinter der Sonne! Das ist ja krass. Siehst du es? Hast du es? Ey, was ist denn das für eine heilige Scheiße, ey? Ey, Alter. Hä? Hast du es gesehen? Ich hab's gesehen!
And that turns out to be about 3,100 miles. And if you were going to try and hide this information, that the sun is actually very close, perhaps you'd encode it in symbol. Does this look familiar?
So here's the exact curvature of Earth as confirmed by a university. At 1 mile distance, it's 8 inches of curve. At 2 miles distance, it's 32 inches. At 100 miles distance, the curve ought to be over 6,500 feet. That's 1.2 miles of predictable curvature. So a commercial jetliner flying at 500 miles per hour would have to continuously point the nose downwards to stay on the curve. Yet we don't see that happening. Critics will say they can see the curve from out the window of a plane, but that's not true because every video posted with a normal lens shows a flat horizon. And all planes are fitted with a horizon gauge, an attitude indicator on the instrument panel. They use the horizon gauge to line up the plane with a flat horizon. You can't line up the plane with a curved horizon. It doesn't work. So it's possible that pilots and airliners don't know the Earth is flat. They follow a designated flight path just like drivers follow the road network. They keep the plane level just like we keep the car level with a steering wheel. But how many of us have considered the exact curvature?
So there's the pretty blue marble that NASA claims we are living on, with circumference of 24,901 and 3959 radius. So to find the curvature, you take 8 inches times your distance squared. That's 8 inches times your distance squared, and if you don't square the distance, you end up with this, and this is not what NASA has shown us. They have given us a beautiful blue marble that we love. So you get 8 inches for 1 mile, 32 inches in 2 miles, 16.6 feet with 5 miles, so on and so forth. So what I did is I shot this pier, which is in Daytona Beach, Florida, And as you can see, between the water and the walkway of the pier is about 12 to 16 feet based on the height of the people and the railing. So I started at Granada, which is 4.92 miles away, and I shot this, and based on that distance and the formula, there should be 16 feet of curvature. But obviously you can still see the entire gap under the walkway there between that and the water. So in addition to that, behind that pier is actually a lighthouse, which you can see right above the pier. You can see the light. That is 16 miles away from my location, and I shot that lighthouse. Now that lighthouse is 175 feet tall, and the curvature from 16 miles away should be 170 feet. You can clearly see about the entire lighthouse beyond that pier. So like I said, there should be 170 feet of curvature, but there's none. And those hotels there are even further. Those are in New Smyrna, which is 20 miles. If NASA is right, and there is, we do live on a ball, they're going to have to make up that curvature. If it's not in the 20 miles I'm shooting, well then that means it's got to be made up further on down the line. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say we live on this ball and then say, oh, you can't detect the curvature. Well, you got to detect it somewhere, because if it's not dropping here, it's going to have to drop even more down the lines in order to make that circle, that ball they say we live on. And it's pretty round. That blue marble they give us is perfectly round.
Lighthouses are one great example. The Isle of Wight Lighthouse in England, it's 180 feet high and can be seen up to 42 miles away, a distance at which modern astronomers say the light should fall 996 feet below the line of sight. Why can you still see it? Another one worth mentioning that people be familiar with is the Statue of Liberty. It stands 326 feet above sea level, and on a clear day can be seen as far as 60 miles away. Now, if the Earth was a globe at the dimensions that they give us, that would put Lady Liberty at an impossible 2,074 feet below the horizon.
No, not one picture of the Earth. Imagine that. 2016, and we still don't have a picture of our home. Thousands of satellites supposedly orbiting the Earth. Why can't we get thousands of pictures? One shot with the whole Earth in it. Hell, we should have a channel on cable that shows the Earth rotating 24 hours a day, every day. Nope. Let's listen to NASA's very own Robert Simon talk about how we get our fake pictures of Earth.
In 1972, we saw our home in a new way. Apollo 17 astronauts snapped this picture.
It gave people the first look at their home planet as a single entity.
Last week, scientists at NASA released this. The shot is compiled from data from NASA's VEERS instrument, which orbits the Earth about every 100 minutes, taking measurements of light coming off the planet. That can be translated into ribbons of imagery like this, and then into one of these. And this is just the latest in NASA's Earth from Space album, which may be one of the most mind-expanding collections of images in human history. Then in 2002, Blue Marble 2.0. NASA's Rob Simon made this. Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it's a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space. But I've looked at these images over and over again, trying to sort of get the essence of it. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Excuse me, I'm allergic to bullshit. Not having one authentic picture of the Earth alone is a huge red flag.
Christoph, let me ask you, why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, the world's gonna change. Because it's just cooler too.
Dude, do you realize what you're saying? You're saying that the Earth is not a ball. Do you know what the ramifications are? Did you really think this through? Like on religion, where we're from, belief, and real estate, the authority of governments, everything. Because you know what? It does hold it all together. When you think about it, it's like, why you emperor? Because I'm emperor. Why you emperor? Because I say so. No, you're not. Why you emperor? Because I have armies. Well, you got money. How'd you get the money on that? Because we figured out the way it is. Because we're in charge of the room. We set up the room. We placed the furniture. We invited you in. This is the shape of the room. This is the amount of space you have to enjoy yourself. This is it. This is the whole room. Yeah, this is the whole room. You wouldn't know if you go into a house and you're unblindfolded if there's other rooms or how big the house is. Is the world that way? Did they rearrange the furniture a certain way and there's another room beyond the wall? It's the old Plato's cave. It's the old, how would you know? That's the shape of the Earth. You've never been up there to see the point of view you think is what you're on. Now, I'm the guy, I'm a threat because I brought that up in 2015. I'm a messenger, okay? Picking my nose. That's it. Painting. You know, lovely women, doing live shows, doing comedy. You know, I had to put my shit aside to go, hold on a second, before you all run off and kill each other in a world war here. This looks like a painting to me. How do you know this is like a real ball? The people want you to go off to war, kill each other. I mean, you've never seen this point of view. I'm just saying, I'm going to go back and do some portraits and some sea life and enjoy myself. By the way, that's a painting. Oh, by the way, clouds not moving from real time-lapse footage of the Earth as a ball in space. Spinning 30% of the Earth, but the clouds don't actually mutate and dissolve like clouds do when I see fast-forward time-lapse just from the ground looking up at sky, or the movie Baraka.
The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat, we take some illusion. The earth is flat, living in illusion. So people don't know what to do. The earth is flat, living in illusion. The earth is flat, staging illusion. The earth is flat, living in illusion. So people don't know what to do.
Cruising at 35,000 feet. And we're about 300 miles from Kessler. Over here, you can see the moon. Then to the left, the sun. How cool is that?
Why don't airports, when you land one way, take into account the Earth spinning or moving like you're landing on an asteroid? Pilots don't take that into account ever. The direction of the airport there's only one thing that determines it, and that's the dominant wind direction. Not any movement. If it's a north-south runway and you're trying to land on it, the Earth's supposedly spinning from the east to the west, so it's moving on you. And as you come down and you're up in the angular velocity of the atmosphere, your angular velocity from the Earth changed, so you have to then land on an asteroid, a moving target. No such calculations are ever made, ever. You talk to any pilot. A pilot uses its attitude adjustment, which is the gyroscope in the middle. It's the ball that snaps to flat horizon. I had the top military pilot from Dubai. I said, your attitude snaps to flat horizon. Explain that for me. So there's only one way to explain it, and that is we're not flying over a curved surface. He was trained since he was 7 years old by the British military to fly at 1 meter above the ground in a jet. 1 meter above the ground in a jet. If the Earth is curving at all and you're not snapped to flat horizon, if you go even a bit down, you're dead in a millisecond. If you go up, you're flying into outer space. Every plane should fly into outer space if, in fact, that attitude is going around a ball. But it snaps to flat horizon because the horizon doesn't actually move up on you or down. Optically, it's flat, and it's also how you fly it, too. So that's evidence to me. And that evidence eventually starts to break it down for you. All of this stuff that you'll hear, people will go, it's flat. Nope, you're just going to get us into another trap, just like the ball got us into a trap. We have evidence. So what we say is, as far as we know now, as far as we know, it's this. As far as we know, it's that. Here's our observations. They lead to this. Copernicus's third observation is left out of history books. What he said, in order to have the heliocentric model and the Earth going around it, is that the rotations of the planets and the sun counter-rotate against the Earth, so we don't appear to notice any change in movement. They just left that one out. We never heard about that one. So instead we got, oh no, the stars don't move because they're 482 quadrillion miles away, or 3.8 trillion miles away. How about they move and we don't move? Feel into that one. Our grid systems, our latitude and longitude is based on the sun and the North Star. Maybe that isn't the top of the world. That's just where the North Star is. When the North Star is directly above you, you're at the North Pole. Does that mean you're at the top of the world? It just means you're following some star chart pattern. May not necessarily have anything to do with what's going on down here. Very good term that I've dug out of this stuff is the pole of inaccessibility. Anybody ever heard of that? The coldest place in Antarctica, the hardest place to reach, a place that's never been reached from two directions at once. You can only go into it one way and then back out the other way, which ought to tell you something. You go back out the way you came. You go in one way, you have to go back out the way you came. It's called the pole of inaccessibility. In the South Pole, it's the coldest place on Earth, the most difficult place on Earth to reach. In the North Pole, it's not in the northern region. It's not the North Pole. It's above Alaska and Russia. It's above the Bering Strait. Straight up there at 85 degrees latitude above the Bering Strait is the coldest and most difficult spot to reach in the northern part of the world. What does this mean? Something to investigate. More questions. One other thing I want to say is about the symmetry of the world. In the northern hemisphere, the tree line ends at the 74th parallel. In the southern, the 56th parallel. Comparing the flora and fauna of Iceland, for example, which is from 62 to 66 degrees of latitude, with 62 to 66 degrees of latitude in the Antarctic Peninsula, that doesn't correlate. They don't match each other. Not in any way. Not even in the time that the sun rises and sets, in equivalent times of the year. It indicates we're not on a ball, a perfect symmetrical ball, going around. So that's more a bit of evidence that I can correlate myself. I can make those observations, and then I can come to conclusions. That's where we're at with all this stuff. Do we know anything? No. As far as we know now, we think it's this, but then we have this evidence too. We need to look at all the evidence.